A quote from Kubo given in a recent interview has been doing the rounds online lately, wherein he drops a pretty tantalizing tease regarding the 1,000 Year Blood War Arc Part 2 that's coming in July. The quote from Kubo reads as follows: "The second core has a new battle that is not in the original. I couldn't draw a battle between one character and another character in the original, and the animation production team said, I want this character to fight in this area." Any potential translation issues aside, that seems pretty clear-cut to me. Excitingly, it looks like we are getting at least one brand new battle that didn't otherwise occur in the source material. Now, whether Kubo means this is a totally new battle between two combatants that didn't otherwise fight during that spate of chapters, or if instead this is rather an extension of, or an actual continuation of, an otherwise interrupted or off-screen battle, we can't otherwise be sure, but the second invasion of the 1,000 Year Blood War arc, for as good as it was, is absolutely full of these moments. Interrupted battles, off-screen fights, and the potential for more fights that never actually came about. So we have a ton of possibilities and options to choose from when trying to work out what fight this is going to be, which characters are going to get this brand new battle. And so in this video, I want to do a rundown of all of the either missing or interrupted battles from the second Quincy invasion, and try to determine which of them is the most likely to receive this exciting treatment, or if it will be a totally brand new fight, and who that might be between. Before we get started, let's just briefly outline the parameters for what might actually be included within this upcoming Part 2. And of course, on that note, there will be huge spoilers for the 1,000 Year Blood War arc to come, including major spoilers for this upcoming Part 2, so you've been warned. Now, I've said before that I think a decent endpoint for this second core would be chapter 611, when Yhwach successfully kills the Soul King. However, I've been kind of doubling back on that recently. I almost think that might be going a little too far into the story, and I could maybe instead see this second part ending with something like chapter 587, which sees Yhwach storming the royal palace after Uryu has just been revealed to be a traitor and has escaped into the sky. I do still have some qualms overall, however, with even this idea, as the trailer for Part 2 definitely featured a Yhwach at the end, whose voice was becoming eerily distorted, which would imply to me, at the very least, he has activated the Almighty, if not even gone further than that and absorbed the Soul King, so maybe 611 around there is going to be right after all. So for the sake of this video, let's say that Part 2 will cover 543 to 611, and all the fights missing and interrupted in between. So if you caught my recent appearance on Tekken 101's Buncast, where we talked about episode 13 of the 1,000 Year Blood War arc anime, you'll already know what my kind of number one pick for this potential battle is, what my immediate gut response was upon first reading this quote. And that's the interrupted battle between Shinji Hirako and Sternritter H. the Heat, Basby, a character who is going to show up on this video quite a bit. So back in the day, when Shinji and Basby came together for what looked to be an exciting clash, it was something that fans were very happy to see. Of course, by this point, Shinji has gone almost completely neglected by Kubo in the final arc, and Basby was already looking to be a very promising and exciting member of the Sternritter, so to see them come together in a fight no one really expected was really very cool. This, of course, takes place in chapter 581, and their meeting only lasts the span of about 2 pages. Basby activates Burner Finger 3, covering the entire arena in lava and seemingly trapping both Shinji and Omaida, and then the next time we see either of these characters, they are both alive and well in completely separate locations, with only a brief throwaway mention by Omaida as to how they got out of that sticky situation. I think this is just a fight that the fans would absolutely love to see. It would give Shinji primarily a chance to do something cool for once, and as I mentioned in my reaction to the Part 2 trailer, there's a very conspicuous line there where Shinji says, "I'm going to upend everything you know and this situation." What's so conspicuous about that line is it sounds very similar to what Shinji says in Can't Fear Your Own World just before activating his bankai. Now, do I think we will get to see his bankai in the anime? I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but of course it would be awesome. At the end of the day though, it really does sound like maybe they are prepping for him to actually do something. Like, you have to appreciate that there really is no opportunity in the original source material for Shinji to have a line like that, because he does so very little. So hopefully, maybe there is a decent chance that it will be Shinji versus Bazby that we actually get to see play out. So that was kind of my number one gut pick, which is why I talked about it first. However, for the rest of these options, let's go through them in chronological order, starting from chapter 547. The first of these potential fights is Mayuri Kurotsuchi versus Sternritter D, the death-dealing Askin Naklavar, which takes place across 547 and 550. But of course, no fight actually breaks out between these two characters outside of a bit of a verbal back and forth. Do I think that any kind of a fight will be shown in the anime itself between them? Probably not, because the entire point of this dialogue, of this meeting, is that Askin undercuts our expectations by actually deciding to bail on this battle against Mayuri, rather than simply trying to lure him into a trap. Askin does actually walk away, and they are never seen together again. So no, I don't think that will be the new fight, although I am looking forward to seeing that scene regardless. Up next, chapter 552, we have potentially Rangiku Matsumoto versus Sternritter I, the Iron Kang-Do. Now, when Kang arrives on the scene to an already defeated Hitsugaya who has been ruthlessly beaten up by Bazby, he reveals an unconscious Matsumoto and dumps her unceremoniously on the floor. So at some point during Hitsugaya's fight with Bazby, Kang-Do found Matsumoto and was able to subdue her. Whether he stealthily took her down in like a single hit, or if they actually had some kind of a battle, we will never know. And yeah, I'd like to see it. However, there are absolutely more urgent battles that I would rather see than this one. So do I think this is going to be the new fight? Probably not again. But we're not done with Kang, because this is a character who gets seriously shafted in the second invasion, and so up next we have Toshiro Hitsugaya versus Kang-Do from chapter 553. Although they do technically get a fight, I put it in quotation marks because it really is the most minimal version of a fight you could possibly get. Their battle lasts for maybe half a chapter, and so Kang gets seriously screwed over in comparison to the rest of the Sternritter that actually stole a bankai, each of whom get at least 3 chapters worth of a battle, if not more. So yeah, personally, I would love to see Kang-Do getting a bit of extra love from Kubo and the anime team. I would love to see him get a proper fight, including the holy form that was actually teased for this character. And if they could actually deal Kang some damage before he gets taken back to Silburn and summarily executed, that might at least make that scene make a little more sense. Next up, we have a slightly weird one, and that is Renji, potentially, versus Sternritter U, the underbelly Nanana Najaku from chapter 566. Now, do I think this fight would ever play out like this? Honestly, probably not, and that's what makes this one such a weird choice. This meeting they have, although it's not really a meeting, basically Renji falls asleep after defeating Master Masculine, only to find that he is being observed by Nanana Najaku the entire time, who thought he had walked upon some kind of a trick, only to learn that no, Renji had actually fallen asleep. Despite this, Nanana watches Renji leave, and you get this really sinister moment where this big grin curls up on his face, and he says, "I've never observed someone for as long as I have you. Your luck has run out, and you are finished, Red Monkey," as he has this massive grin on his face. And then the next time you see Renji, he just turns up to help out Ichigo, and there is no mention of this ever again. Nanana shows up with several other Sternritter to battle Ichigo before that, so apparently he didn't bother going after Renji anyway. So that whole scene is just so weird to me, and I can't help but wonder if maybe Kubo will showcase some kind of a battle between those guys in the anime. Again, it feels kind of unlikely though, because the setup for that moment seemed to imply that Nanana would have defeated Renji had they actually fought, but Renji is at least somewhat important in the next sequence where they all come to aid Ichigo. So I can't help but wonder if maybe they will just totally cut this scene in general, because it really does make absolutely zero sense in the current way it is being portrayed. That being said, Nanana probably should at least get some semblance of a fight at some point, so I wouldn't be averse to it, but it certainly wouldn't be the one I'd want to see the most. Now, chronologically up next is kind of about when the Bambis take on Ichigo. I believe Kubo has already said that the Bambis are also getting a new fight scene. I might be misremembering that, but if so, I don't think that is going to be this fight, as it seems like the battle they're talking about here is explicitly a 1v1 or even maybe a 2v1 scenario, probably not including a large group of characters like the Bambis. I think outside of their new fight scene, everything else they do will probably be left mostly unchanged. And to be honest, this is where things start to get a little bit messy in the second invasion overall. Yhwach has now blasted his way up to the royal palace, sending a shockwave across the battlefield that separates all of the remaining fighters into their own little pockets and supposedly their own little fights, but we don't really get to see that many of them. It's possible that the new fight will be between Byakuya and one of the Sternritter that he defeats off-screen, so either Candice Catnip, Nana Nanajakoop again, or Robert Akutrone. Robert is the one I would absolutely want to see the most here, after being such a badass and integral part of the Vandenrijk's forces in the first invasion. He is completely and utterly sidelined in the second invasion with absolutely nothing to do except for to be defeated, off-screen in chapter 594. So that was always a huge shame. I would love to see Robert versus Byakuya, would be pretty cool, even if apparently it would be quite one-sided. Perhaps that would also give us a golden opportunity to get to learn Robert's Shrift. Another fight that I could absolutely see being included that takes place almost entirely off-screen is Renji and Rukia versus Bazz-B, that takes place across both chapter 587 and then not again until 604. I think fans would absolutely love to see a powerful duo of Renji and Rukia actually fighting side by side against one of the most prominent and powerful of the Sternritter. And personally, I know we've talked about him a bit already in this video, but I feel like Bazz-B does need just one more big fight to really kind of cement himself as one of those major antagonists from this arc. Because the two fights he does get, while good, are both total stomps. Like, Bazz-B completely destroys Hitsugaya at the start of the second invasion, and then when it comes to his fight against Hashwolf, he is completely destroyed. So one big tentpole battle that's more evenly based for Bazz-B, I think would go a long way to establishing him as one of the biggest villainous faces in this arc. So I mean, that's kind of it really for the more off-screen and interrupted fights, but how about some actually brand new ones that otherwise didn't happen really at all? Now, I haven't seen too many people considering this, but it's highly possible that the recipient of this brand new fight is Ichigo. It would be awesome for Ichigo to get a new 1v1 battle in the second invasion wherein he otherwise doesn't really do a whole lot. And especially after the emotional climax that is The Blade Is Me, that wonderful piece of character development that kind of finishes off his character journey, it's a shame that after this Ichigo never really gets a chance to show off what he can do and what he has learned. I imagine Ichigo's fight against the Bambis, and again I say fight in quotation marks because by that point he is so far above them, he's basically just toying with them, but I imagine that fight will be left mostly the same, as will his confrontation with 8 Sternritter at once. But honestly, Ichigo has such a weird role to play in the second invasion. It was always so strange that he spends like 30 chapters flying down to the Seirete only to go back up almost immediately. So a big sort of milestone battle for Ichigo against a major opponent, the likes of which he used to get in those earlier arcs that would actually kind of punctuate the story, wouldn't go amiss here at all. But who could Ichigo fight? Well, I said we were going to talk about him a lot in this video, and again, I think Bazz-B is absolutely a natural pick here. He already kind of falls into that Renji Grimjo mold, and although Bazz-B doesn't share the same relationship with Ichigo that those rival villain characters would have built up over many chapters, it would still be an epic spectacle, and Bazz-B would at least be presumably somewhat strong enough to enable Ichigo to give us a decent showing. But another character like Ichigo who should have absolutely done more in the 1000 Year Blood War arc, and that the anime is already well on its way to rectifying, is of course Uryu Ishida. Now there are a ton of brand new lines in the trailer for part 2, some of which do belong to Uryu, and one in particular stood out to me when I was kind of researching what I thought this new battle could be. Towards the end of the trailer, Uryu says, "I am Uryu Ishida, and on my pride as a Quincy, I shall eliminate you." Now, who on earth is he talking to here? I'll tell you what, that never happens in the source material. So it does seem like they are maybe setting Uryu up for some kind of big spectacle moment, potentially a brand new fight. But it is tough to say who Uryu is talking to here. It's not like he can kill anybody unless the team is planning on dramatically changing the story after this second part. It's possible, of course, that we can take out two birds with one stone here and give both Ichigo and Uryu a brand new fight in this second part by having them face each other in a 1v1 battle, presumably just before Uryu ascends to the royal palace. It doesn't really make much sense that Uryu would be telling Ichigo his name, although I suppose you could spin it in the context of Uryu reaffirming his allegiance to Yhwach and the Vandenreich, perhaps. But I mean, I would love to see this, and I think a lot of people would as well, and again, it feels like a totally natural choice, especially since they are calling this part the separation. What better way to hammer that home than to effectively end this next batch of episodes with a big clash between two former friends now on opposite sides of the war. Not only that, but one of the strangest seemingly dropped plot points of this arc was in chapter 543, Yhwach, when naming Uryu his heir, explicitly tells the Sternritter that they will see this man's power in the battles to come, and they never do. Uryu does literally nothing to showcase he has become extraordinarily powerful, and certainly not in a way that any Sternritter could see. Imagine if the explosive showdown between Ichigo and Uryu was being witnessed by basically everyone on the battlefield, if the war came to a standstill just to watch that fight play out, to see who the Emperor's new heir actually is and what he can do. I think it makes perfect sense. And so at the end of the video, what do I think the new fight will be? I think basically it's going to come down to either Shinji versus Bazby, getting to see that interrupted off-screen fight play out in full, or a brand new battle between Ichigo and Uryu. I could absolutely see both of these. Who's to say we won't get both of them? Again, I don't want to be too optimistic here, as it's already wonderful enough that we're getting any new content whatsoever. But absolutely those two, I think, are probably the most promising, most likely choices. Let me know in the comments below what new fight you think we'll get to see in the 1000 Year Blood War Arc Part 2. What would you want to see the absolute most? Is it any of the ones I have laid out for you here on this video? Do please let me know. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already, guys, and as always, a massive shout out and a thank you to each and every one of my patrons. I really do appreciate your support. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.